Hi, and welcome to this very short video about how to navigate social situations, festive seasons, birthdays, those sort of things. Social situations can be difficult at any time if you want to be the person that's watching what you're eating or drinking. And when you're out and about, there's lots of friends that want to do lots of nice favors for you, bring you lots of nice food. But in the end, you will have to not be the guy or gal that turns their nose up to all these offers. You just don't want to be that party pooper, but equally, you don't want to be like that. You don't want to turn your nose up at everything. So this Christmas season, it's December now when I'm recording it, I thought I'd actually look at these problems because they're slightly larger. There's a lot of pressure to do a lot of things. And I'm going to give you some practical general tips and try to give you some tricks based on scientific study as to what's the best thing to do when you're trying to navigate a social situation. Because when you arrive at a social situation, it's all jolly, but as you can see, there might be some nibbles on the table that is very tempting for a lot of people. And you just don't want to be the person that is going to arrive and dive straight into it. So what's the first tip? Well, don't arrive hungry. That's my first tip. Now, I know this sounds really strange, but doing a lot of my coaching sessions, one of the most common questions I encounter is, how do I avoid any problems with eating on my way into these social situations? Well, the first trick is that don't arrive hungry. And this simple piece of advice has helped, honestly, countless people during the many years of this situation. Personally, I've long since removed the old-fashioned thinking of building up my appetite. You're ready for that big meal out in the evening. I mean, it used to be a common practice to actually make oneself hungry before going to a posh restaurant. And that's no longer the way to do it. So my first real tip is before you go, make sure that you are not hungry. The second tip is to look at when you're there, filling up with healthy protein and fats first. This tip is backed by science and it is easy to implement. When dining, it's sort of known actually that you can fill up on bread, which is a real fine dining establishment trick, to be honest. They offer you this fresh baked bread, and of course you take the bait because it does look great and it smells wonderful. But my tip here is flipping this on its head, and you avoid carbohydrates and instead fill up with the much healthier options of proteins and healthy fats. So this is, like I say, absolutely backed up by science. For those of you that are not sure why this works in keeping fat off your body, the trick of eating protein and fats seems to keep insulin low while satiety is high. So if you're looking at insulin, it's an anabolic hormone and it does turn off fat metabolism and can make you store fat. So, I mean, that's taken from Guyton's medical physiology textbook. And it's one of the easiest things to do, actually, is to make sure that you're eating protein first. The next tip is to just say no. There is a lot of potent pressure actually put on you to just eat what you're given. So be prepared for a good answer if you feel pressured to eat some food that you don't really want to eat. I've been in that situation where the family are very well-meaning. They offer you Auntie Jane's wonderful homemade triple chocolate sugar-infused candy top muffle style cheesecake ice cream, which obviously on many levels is quite difficult to say no to. But if you have a really good response to that and you just say no, well, that can be all you need to do. But you can also be prepared. You know, you can be prepared with some really nice things to say. You can try and be the example. You can talk about how it's helped your health. If people do know you, you could probably point to the fact that you've lost some pounds, or you just simply have more energy. There's many different things you can point to. But I would like to make it clear to people that there are lots of other situations where you wouldn't be pressured. If you were somebody that needed to be gluten-free, means no one ever pressures a gluten-free person, I'll go and try some bread. Same with the nut allergy. If you were allergic to peanuts, you wouldn't say, well, you know, we've made some homemade peanut butter. Maybe you should just try that. And of course, in my realm, there's a lot of people that are, you know, diabetic, and they have been saying this sort of thing. Yeah, the informed diabetics, I should say, have been saying this sort of thing for many, many years, that they can avoid sugar and they can avoid fruits, and it's really good for their diabetic symptoms, the high blood glucose or blood glucose management, we should say. So that's the next one. Just be prepared and have something nice and relevant to say. Now, there is what I would call a last resort situation as well when you're out socially. So we've tried saying no, and that hasn't worked. And we've tried being pretty clever with some of our way of talking. We've given an example of a gluten-free person. Well, there is a final thing that could happen here. So this is what I call the last resort approach. Now, there are some people that just don't listen, especially in a restaurant, and the thing turns up and you've got your steak, but they've also put something else on there. That's not pretty good. And from experience, I've learned to say, I don't like waste. So if someone is taking my order, for instance, I would say to them, to the server, look, really don't put things on my plate because I hate to see food wasted. I really only want the steak and the bacon and the cheese. I don't want salad. I don't want the chef to make it look really pretty. So can you make sure that you leave the food off the plate that I'm not going to eat, because it should stay in the kitchen, not on my plate, because you're just going to waste it then. There is the next situation, though, like I say, the real last resort. And that's where you do want to partake in something yourself. You do want to have a potato, for instance. And this is the last tip. And that's, if you really cannot miss out on, say, for instance, roast potatoes that your auntie is famous for, then change the order in which you eat things. I've linked a study in the show notes, but by simply eating carbs last will lower your insulin response in your body. And this, eating the fats and protein first, this will give you a feeling of fullness. And so when you do get to those carbohydrates that you were initially going to avoid, you will eat less of them. So there's a study that I'm going to mention that proves that this is really good. But firstly, I just want to show you this graph, which is fantastic, from the Glucose Goddess. She's really good on Instagram. I think she has a web page as well. And if you just look at that, this is when someone has eaten a potato first and then the beef, and this is the glucose, the blood sugar reading. Look at that spike in, and then you get a slight crash actually as well, which will make you feel hungrier, even though you've just eaten potatoes and beef. This is where you've mixed the beef and potatoes, and the spike isn't so much, and it levels out. Takes a little bit of time, but you don't get that crash. And then this is somebody eating the beef first and then the potato. And as you can see, that is a much lower spike for a start. And also the blood glucose normalizes much quicker. So if you look at what we call the curve here, I mean, the area under the curve is very small compared to this huge amount of time when your blood glucose is up, and here it spikes, crashes, the infamous sugar crash, and then you get this feeling of absolute hunger again, which is why if you eat this way, you tend to really want dessert. And this is the sciencey geeky bit, just for those that, like I say, there's a link in the show notes. CF means carbohydrate first, CL means carbohydrate last, and then there's a sandwich. And basically what's happened, if you've got carbohydrates first, up goes your glucose, and look at this, obviously up goes your insulin. And when you've got carbohydrates last, look at this, you know, it's much flatter. And same here with the insulin, it's much flatter. Then what you don't really want is, you don't want spikes and crashes, going back to the other illustration, because you get these spikes and then you get a crash. And this is an area when you're low blood sugar, you start feeling tired, you start feeling hungry. So you end up eating more, or you go on to the desserts, those sort of things. And that's taken from, like I say, the Glucose Goddess. So anyway, I hope those tips to navigate social situations and festive seasons and birthdays has been helpful. And as always, please like, share, and comment below. And hopefully you'll be watching some more of my videos. There should be a playlist somewhere on the screen for you to have a look at.